Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to just do something a bit different. I was quite intrigued by this thermo tape, which is a heat bonding Roman blind tape. So instead of doing a rod pocket on the back of a blind, you apply a tape. Now, when everybody started making Roman blinds years ago, decades ago, all there was really was to put tape on. And this really is born out of the evolution of that tape. The original tape started just as a single thickness tape, and you sewed both sides of the tape to create the pocket through which you put the rod. Then it sort of very quickly became apparent that sewing the tape on both sides didn't work that well, because you were sewing it flat down to the fabric and you couldn't create a really nice sharp hinge for the folds to create. So then people started to sew just the tape on just on one side, and this is quite a good version of one of those tapes, in that it's got a slightly wider flange on one side so that the pockets are offset. And then the tapes evolved to having a separate pocket to put the rod through. So it's like a double layered tape. And you used to have to put the rods in at the end and finish the ends off afterwards, which is a bit of a fiddle, to be honest. Then somebody came up with a clever idea of only sort of tacking the rod pocket down. And so it was made with these little slits. So you could easily, once the tape was on and the ends done up as well, you could slot the rod in. And indeed, I've made up hundreds of blinds for more contracty sort of jobs. I've made up hundreds of blinds with this tape, and it works really well. Very fast to use, strong, good. But this is slightly different in that it's heat bonded on rather than sewn on. Now, when I first turned it over and looked at it, I was a bit disappointed because it's got the glue, the polymer strips, which is the glue, on both sides, top and bottom. So I thought, oh, it's designed to be pressed down completely flat, which I didn't really like initially. But then I discovered, and I'm not sure whether this is intentional or just a happy accident, but because of it's a polymer, it only reacts when you put heat on it. It has to be heated quite high, and then the polymer melts into the tape and it melts down into the lining fabric as well to really seal and bond. Because of that, it can't be put on too heavily when it's initially put on, so it comes off really easily. Really easily. So it's almost like it's been designed that way. It may be. Anyway, you can pull that off, and then you can stick it on just with that bottom row of polymer, much like a sew-on tape is these days. So I was quite encouraged by that. I thought I'd give it a go. For anybody that's used sew-on tapes, they'll recognise this as being quite a standard tape. It's a good quality one as well. It's got reinforced edges to the bottom of the pockets. So when you thread the cord through, this is the edge that gets most of the friction. And like I say, it's got the slits for inserting the rods in, and it's a nice quality. Some are a bit slippery and a bit unstable, but this is nice. It's 18mm wide. This is the ivory colour, and they've also got it now in a cream colour and a transparent as well. So if you're doing multiple different linings or something and you're using it a lot, actually a transparent one might be handy to just use on everything then. I thought I would test it first on 2 standard linings. This is 100% cotton sateen. I've removed the top bit already and pressed it on this just along the bottom edge, and it sticks really well. It's really bonded, and actually when you turn it over you can see that I have actually pressed this quite a few times to really give it some stick and test it, and you can see the polymer come through that other side there, and it sets quite hard. And it's pretty sticky. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't easily want to come off. It will come off. If you pull it hard enough, it'll come off. But then if you pull a row of stitches hard enough, it'll break and come off. So that's on the standard lining, and then I did it also on a standard sort of DB1 type, cotton rich but polycotton sateen. And the same thing applied really. It's just really well stuck. You know, you have to really pull it to get any movement from it. So that was a good start. Then I thought I'd have a fiddle with doing the ends, because they're always messy with tapes, doing the ends. When I used to use a lot of this sew-on tape, I used to cut it, turn the ends, machine it onto the tape, do the same at the other end, and then run down each side, just pulling the lining out the way and just machining the ends shut. And it was okay. It gave, you know, it gave a good, strong, nice finish, but it just a bit fiddly, you know. And to me, it was, with this particularly, it sort of defeats the object, because really the idea is that it's, because it's heat bonded, you don't really want to take it away from the table. I think the idea is to be able to bond it to the lining, not sew it, and finish the ends without needing to take anything to the sewing machine. So I had a play. The first one I did, I machined it. I did try machining it first, and yeah, it machines okay, you know. I pulled the bottom strip of polymer back out the way, turned it just once, machined it, and then let that polymer flip back over the top. I don't really like the machined end, but it's okay. Then I tried heat sealing it using the polymer strip itself, and using mostly the bit that I'd removed. Actually, this one's still on, but I had lots of bits that I'd removed. So leaving the polymer strip at the bottom to let it run into the end, folding it over, and then using another little bit of polymer strip underneath and inside as well, because it's pocketed, you need to put a bit inside and underneath. Press it down, and that, it really seals it. It gives it quite a neat sealed finish when you look at the right side. So that was a success, I thought, quite smart. But then it occurred to me that actually there's a much easier way, because it's got this little pocket in the end. I thought, well, why not just put a little bit of the polymer in the end? I've got a little bit here. So just cut a little piece like that, and then slot it in the end there. So you put the little piece in there, and then lay it down, and you just be careful, because you've got the polymer strip still in along the bottom edge there. You don't want to melt that away. And then just take the tip of the iron, go just up to that flange at the bottom. If you hold it long enough, and then I just sort of squeezed it out the end, and a bit of the polymer comes out the end. It's a bit like glue stick, glue gun glue. So when you do get it on your workroom table, you can scratch it off. Should have put something down. Anyway, so now you've got this sort of sealed end, and it's a bit tatty. So, but because it's sealed with the glue, you can just trim it off nice and neat without worrying about it fraying. So that was my best solution to finishing the ends, and indeed is what I used ultimately on this blind. So I've got this line in here that I am preparing for a blind job I'm doing. I'm also recording that because it's an update on the integral returns, the flaps. So it's not finished yet, but I'll put a link up here when it's done. So it seemed a good opportunity to use this tape at the same time and to try it out, see how it went. Anyway, as normal, I turned the edges of the lining over first, the hems. Then I marked up my position of my rod pockets. Oh, the only other thing you really need to be cautious of is if you look when, in fact I'll show you on here, it's easier. Because it's a strip of polymer glue, when you iron it on, it's slightly different than just a single stitch line, which just creates a very thin stitch line point of contact, whereas this is much wider. See what I mean? You've got the thickness of the glue, and I've measured this a few times, and the allowance I came up with was 6mm. So just be cautious of that when you're marking up your blinds, because the crease point, naturally it wants to crease at the top of that. So when you're folding the blind up, if you mock it up like this, you'll see it wants to naturally fold at the top of that band of glue. There. So if you mark the bottom of the tapes 6mm below the line that you really do need, and then also when you're locking this to the next layer of fabric, because then you would then continue on as if this was a standard lining with pockets, whether you do stab stitches or little running locking stitches. I tend to do running locking stitches. I would use that top line as my line to match the running locking stitches too. All those layers of fabric, you might have a layer of face fabric bonded into lining and lining, or even 4 layers. I did one recently where I had the face fabric, I had an interlining, then a blackout lining, and then a standard lining. And each one of those layers, when you lock it in, you need to get the locking in stitches directly one above the other. Otherwise, if you don't do that, when the blind pulls up and down, if you've got the stitch lines in different heights, you get weird bagging of the fabric, particularly on the front fabric, because everything's pulling it, that it's not been held together nice and firm all together in one go. When I come to make this blind, I'll be talking about that, so it's worth checking out, because it's very hard to explain that without actually showing it. I've just realised as I've tried to explain it. Anyway, so I'll just show you pressing on this piece I've got here, because it's worth showing, and I quite like this tape. I mean, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea to use tape. Most people will want to do a sewn in pocket and rings, or use the little punched eyelets, but it has its place using this tape. You know, you can't discount things like this. You know, if you were doing a big hotel job or lots and lots of blinds that, you know, the client didn't want to spend huge amounts on, or you needed to save time on, this will save you quite a lot of time. You're not marking out for 2 rows of stitchings to create a pocket. You're only making 1 line. You're just pressing it straight on at the table. You're not having to move the line in and take it elsewhere, back like over to the machine. You're not then having to finish the pocket with rings or eyelets afterwards. It's ready just to be threaded up, sewn on, threaded up. So it does save quite a lot of time over several blinds. Anyway, we'll just do one. I'll show you how I press it on. So I have a piece of lining. I've just got some cotton sateen as an offcut, the first piece I came across. And I've got my little piece of tape. I've finished the ends, so I've put a little piece of the polymer glue in the pocket, pressed it, snipped it over to tidy it up, and the same on that end. And if we lay this on, it's just shy of the finish width. I tend to do it not the exact width. And what you'll also find actually is if you press this on hot enough to get the polymer to melt, it does shrink a little bit. It tightens up, but you can pull back against that just as it's cooling and stop any puckering up, any wrinkling. So first of all, I remove that top strip because we don't need it. So there we go. We know which is the top and bottom. There's the bottom. It's got that wide flange there, and the reinforced pockets are on that side as well. And then like I said before, allow for the fold to begin only 6mm up from the bottom of this tape. So this measurement will be 6mm shy of what you really intend it to be, just for the purposes of putting lining the tape up and putting it on. So it's just a simple case of laying it on and pressing it. Couldn't be simpler, really. If it's not hot enough, it doesn't stick. So my iron is a cordless, so it does cool down quite quickly. It's probably better with a corded iron, to be fair. You see there it's starting to, but if you stretch it back again, just as it's cooling, it comes back flat. So I'm just lining up the bottom edge of the tape with that line I've drawn. So just stretch that back out while it's cooling. And then what I'll do is I'll go over the whole thing and then I'll stretch it. There you see, so it's gone nicely flat again now. I'd pay particular attention to the very ends, because if it's going to come undone, if it's not stuck properly there, and it can start to come away there, if it's going to at all, then it will pull away, a bit like Velcro once it's started. But like I say, it's pretty sticky. So and then if you turn it over, you should be able to see the polymer coming through. And if you don't see like a darkened line, just go over this side as well, just to sort of draw it up from underneath. I'm still getting used to it, so you know, I think once you've worked out the heat setting of your iron and everything, doing it from the front, it'll be much easier. There we go. So it's done. That's it. Like I said, there's the crease that will form and fold up like that. So there we go. I hope that was useful and informative. But please let me know if you've got any queries, and just ask in the comments. And if it's the first video you've watched, please consider subscribing and if you click the little notification bell and select all, any new video I upload, you'll be notified of straight away. Thank you very much. Goodbye.